Your doctor looks at your memory test results and says, "Everything looks fine. A little age-related forgetfulness. Completely normal." And you think, well, the doctor seems satisfied. I must be doing okay. I hear this every single week. Patients sitting across from me relieved, pointing at a test score like it's a certificate of safety. After 20 years as a neurosurgeon, I'm telling you straight, that misunderstanding has led to situations requiring significant medical intervention. And more importantly, it has sent people down a path of preventable decline that could have been stopped years earlier. Because there are two very different things happening in the aging brain after 60. Two processes, two warning signs. And the one that most doctors spend the least time explaining is the one most likely to gradually impact your ability to live independently over the next 10 years. Today, I'm going to change that. In the next approximately 20 minutes, I'll show you exactly which brain warning sign to watch, why the two types of brain aging after 60 play by completely different rules, and what you can do starting this week to protect your mind without waiting for a crisis. Stay with me and watch the whole video till the end. This one is genuinely important. Brain health after 60 is a completely different conversation than brain health at 40. Most people first start thinking seriously about memory and cognition somewhere in their 50s. They read an article. A family member is diagnosed with something. They start worrying about Alzheimer's. And that worry is understandable. Alzheimer's disease is real, it is devastating, and it deserves serious attention. But here is what 20 years of clinical practice has taught me that no single article ever fully captures. Alzheimer's disease accounts for roughly 60 to 70% of dementia diagnoses. But the second most common cause of dementia, vascular dementia, accounts for most of the remaining cases. And unlike Alzheimer's, vascular dementia is largely preventable. Not theoretically preventable, practically, measurably preventable, with tools that are available to you right now. And it is consistently underdiagnosed, underexplained, and undertreated. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Let's get the language right. When doctors talk about brain aging, there are two broad categories of concern. The first is neurodegeneration. This is the category that includes Alzheimer's disease. It involves the gradual loss of neurons themselves. Proteins called amyloid and tau accumulate in the brain tissue over decades. The brain physically shrinks in specific regions. The damage, once significant, cannot be reversed with current treatments. The second is cerebrovascular disease. This involves damage to the blood vessels that supply the brain. Small vessels thicken, narrow, and eventually close off. Areas of brain tissue receive an insufficient supply of oxygen. This shows up on brain scans as white matter hyperintensities, small bright spots scattered through the brain's white matter that represent areas of past damage. Here's what matters most for people over 60. Cerebrovascular disease is far more common than most patients realize. By age 70, up to 70% of people have some detectable white matter changes on MRI. And the process that causes them, chronically elevated blood pressure, uncontrolled blood sugar, high cholesterol, smoking, begins silently years or even decades before any cognitive symptom appears. And this is where people get significantly confused. A normal memory test does not mean your brain vessels are healthy. A score of 28 out of 30 on a cognitive screening tool is genuinely reassuring for gross neurodegeneration. It tells you that large regions of the brain are still functioning well. It tells you almost nothing about the state of your small blood vessels. The damage I am describing is quiet, invisible to the patient. It doesn't show up on a memory quiz. It builds in the background for years, while every test says you're fine. And then one day, it doesn't. Let me be completely clear about what this means in practice. I've had patients who could recall word lists perfectly, tell me the date and year, and draw a clock correctly, all normal. And whose MRI showed significant white matter disease that we had completely missed the window to address optimally. Here is the core of what I want you to understand. After 60, your brain's small blood vessels are under threat from a set of completely identifiable, largely modifiable risk factors. And the damage they cause looks almost exactly like Alzheimer's disease in its early stages. The forgetfulness, the occasional confusion, the difficulty with word finding, the personality changes. They can be identical in presentation. But the cause is different. The prevention is different. And crucially, the opportunity to act is different. Let me give you a real picture of what cerebrovascular damage looks like inside the brain. Imagine your brain's white matter as a vast cable network. Billions of connections running between regions. Every thought, every memory, every motor command travels through this network. Now imagine that small sections of those cables are quietly losing their blood supply. The tissue doesn't die dramatically, it just stops functioning efficiently. Messages that used to travel in a fraction of a second now take longer, arrive incomplete, or don't arrive at all. This is called small vessel disease, and it accumulates in silence. The first sign is often subtle. Processing speed slows slightly. The person takes a little longer to respond in conversation. Multitasking becomes harder. They lose track of the sequence of a task they've done 1,000 times. These changes are so gradual that family members and the patients themselves write them off as normal aging. And sometimes they are. But sometimes they are the early footprint of a process that will significantly impair independence within 5 to 10 years. And that process was preventable. Think about someone you know who seemed to just get slower, more confused in their late 60s or early 70s. We accept it so readily as inevitable. Sometimes it is inevitable. Sometimes it was entirely preventable, and the window was open for years before it closed. Let's talk about what your brain scan actually shows. Because most patients, after getting an MRI, receive a summary that either says normal for age or lists findings they don't understand. White matter hyperintensities. That phrase appears on a very large percentage of MRI reports for patients over 60. And most patients are never told what it means. I'm going to tell you now. White matter hyperintensities are bright spots on certain types of MRI sequences that indicate areas of past damage in the brain's white matter. They represent regions where small blood vessels have been compromised. Some of the tissue has been replaced by fluid or scar. Small, sparse, white matter hyperintensities in an older adult are extremely common and generally considered a normal part of aging. They don't require intervention. They warrant monitoring, but moderate to extensive white matter hyperintensities are a different matter entirely. They are strongly associated with increased risk of stroke. They are one of the strongest imaging predictors of progression to vascular dementia. And they are a clear signal that the risk factors driving this damage need to be addressed urgently. Here is the critical question most patients never ask their doctor. Are my white matter changes mild, moderate, or significant? And what do they tell us about my blood vessel health? That question opens a conversation that most patients never have, and it is one of the most important medical conversations you can initiate. Now let me tell you about the warning signs that should make you act. Not the dramatic symptoms, not a sudden stroke, the quiet ones, the ones that build over months and years, while every routine check says you're fine. The first warning sign: slowing of processing speed. Not forgetting, slowing. You've always been the person who could hold several things in your head at once. Now you need a moment. You lose your place in a conversation more often. You feel slightly behind in a fast-moving discussion. Processing speed is one of the earliest cognitive domains affected by small vessel disease, and it is one of the least tested in routine checkups. A standard memory test doesn't catch it reliably. The second warning sign: executive function difficulties. These are the higher-level skills: planning, organizing, managing complex tasks, switching between mental activities. These functions live primarily in the frontal lobe and its connections, which are heavily dependent on intact white matter pathways. When those pathways are being compromised, patients report that complex tasks feel harder than they used to: preparing a complicated meal, managing finances, following a detailed project. These things require more effort than they did 5 years ago. This is not the same as forgetting where you put your keys. This is a different cognitive signal, and it warrants a different clinical conversation. The third warning sign: mood and personality changes. Depression in older adults is frequently under-recognized as a possible early sign of cerebrovascular disease, not mood changes from life circumstances. A shift in baseline mood, motivation, and emotional regulation that doesn't entirely fit the person's history. Small vessel disease affects the same circuits that regulate emotion, the frontal subcortical networks. When those connections are disrupted, mood disorders that look like pure psychiatry are sometimes partly vascular. I am not saying every case of late-onset depression is vascular disease. I am saying it belongs on the list of questions worth asking. Have you noticed any of these 3 patterns in yourself or someone you love? Write it in the comments. I want to hear what brought you to this video today. Let's talk about numbers. Blood pressure is the single most powerful modifiable risk factor for small vessel brain disease. Full stop. Every major longitudinal study confirms the same thing. Midlife hypertension, meaning elevated blood pressure between the ages of 40 and 65, significantly accelerates cerebrovascular aging and raises dementia risk by 20 to 40%, depending on severity and duration. The critical point: the damage accumulates during the years when blood pressure is elevated, not after, during. A person who spends their 50s with a systolic blood pressure consistently around 145 and is told it's borderline, let's watch it, may arrive at their late 60s with significant white matter disease already present, disease that better pressure control might have prevented. Current guidelines recommend a systolic target of below 130 for adults over 65 with hypertension. Not 140. Not close enough. 130. That target is backed by outcome data showing reduced rates of stroke, cognitive decline, and dementia. Blood sugar is the second major driver. Diabetes and prediabetes damage the brain's small vessels through the same mechanisms as hypertension, but through a different chemical pathway. Chronically elevated glucose stiffens and narrows small vessel walls. The brain pays a price that accumulates quietly for years, and the key word is quietly. Pre-diabetes causes 0 symptoms. People walk around with fasting glucose in the impaired range for 5 to 10 years while their small vessels are being damaged, and they feel perfectly fine. When did you last have a fasting blood glucose test? That is a question worth asking your doctor at your next appointment, if you haven't had one in the past year. The third major factor, sleep quality. This is the area where neuroscience has made genuinely extraordinary progress in the last decade. The brain has its own waste clearance system. It's called the glymphatic system, and it operates almost exclusively during deep sleep. During deep sleep, cerebrospinal fluid pulses through channels around the brain's blood vessels, flushing out metabolic waste products, including amyloid, the protein that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. Chronic poor sleep, meaning less than 6 hours, fragmented sleep from sleep apnea, or consistently poor sleep quality significantly impairs this clearance process. Waste products accumulate that would otherwise be removed overnight. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is the brain's maintenance cycle. And after 60, protecting deep sleep quality is one of the most powerful things you can do for long-term brain health. Now let me be direct about something I see constantly in my practice. Patients come to me frightened. They've Googled their symptoms. They're convinced they have Alzheimer's. They have a family history. Their father forgot people's names at 70. They're convinced it's inevitable. And sometimes, after a proper evaluation, I have to tell them something that genuinely surprises them. The pattern of changes they're experiencing looks more consistent with cerebrovascular disease than neurodegeneration. And that means the story isn't written yet. Because vascular risk factors respond to treatment. Blood pressure responds to medication and lifestyle change. Blood sugar responds to diet, exercise, and medication. Sleep apnea responds to treatment. The changes in the brain's small vessels can't be fully reversed, but their progression can be slowed significantly, and for some patients, measurably. That is not a small claim. That is the difference between a progressive deterioration and a stable plateau. Between losing independence at 75 and maintaining it into your 80s. The treatment approach depends entirely on identifying the correct underlying process, and that requires asking the right questions. Not just, is my memory normal, but what do my vessels look like? What are my blood pressure readings at home? What is my fasting glucose? What does my sleep quality look like? Those questions require a different kind of medical conversation, a more complete one. Before I close, let me tell you about a patient I'll call Elena, 68 years old, retired teacher, referred to me because her family was concerned about forgetfulness. She had started losing track of conversations, repeating herself occasionally. Her family was preparing for an Alzheimer's diagnosis. Elena's cognitive testing was mildly impaired in processing speed and executive function. Her memory, tested carefully, was actually relatively preserved. Her MRI showed moderate white matter changes. Her blood pressure at home was running around 148/88. Her fasting glucose was in the pre-diabetic range. Her husband mentioned she snored heavily and woke up unrefreshed. This was not primarily an Alzheimer's picture. This was a vascular picture with modifiable drivers that nobody had comprehensively addressed. We treated her blood pressure to target. Her primary care doctor managed her blood sugar. She was evaluated for sleep apnea, diagnosed, and started on treatment. We added supervised exercise and dietary changes targeting her cardiovascular risk. 18 months later, her processing speed scores had improved. Her family reported that she was sharper, more present in conversations. The white matter changes on her MRI had not progressed. I cannot promise you that outcome in every case. I wish I could. But I can tell you that Elena's story is not unusual. It happens regularly when the right questions are asked at the right time. Let's bring it all together. 1. After 60, cerebrovascular disease is as significant a threat to your brain as neurodegeneration, and it is far more preventable. 2. A normal memory test does not mean your brain vessels are healthy. Ask specifically about white matter changes on any brain imaging you receive. 3. The key warning signs of vascular brain impact are slowed processing speed, executive function difficulty, and mood changes. These are different from memory complaints and warrant a different clinical conversation. 4. Blood pressure is the single most powerful modifiable brain risk factor. Your target after 65 is below 130 systolic. That target protects your brain, not just your heart. 5. Blood sugar and sleep quality are the other two major drivers. Ask about your fasting glucose. Protect your deep sleep. Both are directly tied to the health of your brain's small vessels. Here's what I want you to do this week. 1 concrete thing. Ask your doctor at your next appointment, "Can you tell me specifically about my white matter on any brain imaging I've had? And what are my blood pressure and fasting glucose numbers telling you about my cerebrovascular risk?" Those 2 questions might start the most important medical conversation you've had in years. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been told your memory test is normal, but you know something feels different? What brought you here today? If this video helped you understand something about your brain health that you didn't know before, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this. Take care of your brain. It is who you are. Everything shared in this video is general medical information based on current neuroscience research and clinical experience. It is not personal medical advice. Before making any changes to your care, please speak with your own physician.